Good afternoon. Welcome to Lecture 4. Today we are going to talk about monopoly, but before we start, let's just remember what we talked about in lecture number 3. So previously in economics and society, we talked about the production function, the cost of the production in the short-term period and in the long-run period. We had to distinguish that the short-term period is when we have at least one production factor that is fixed and we cannot change it, and then in the long-run period, everything is flexible and we can affect it. Then we had a video about returns and economies of scale. We saw how each of these two work and also what are their differences. We talked about perfect competition. We set up the assumptions. We said what is the profit maximization condition in general, independently of market structure. Like, for example, we are going to use it even today in monopoly, the same profit maximization condition. But then we said that there is a specific version of this condition that is used under perfect competition. So in general, the profit maximization condition, in other words, is MR equals MC, while in perfect competition specifically is P equals MC, because always in perfect competition, P equals MR, which is something that is not true under monopoly. Then we talked about the short-term supply decision and the supply curve of the perfectly competitive firm. And finally, we talked about the long-run supply of a PC firm and what happens in the long-run period. So today, the discussion will be around monopoly and also market efficiency. Market efficiency, we will analyze it under both monopoly and perfect competition in order to see how market efficiency works in each of the two. So we'll start with setting up monopoly and how monopoly works. We will talk about market power, then we'll talk about efficiency, and then I will show you the online tutorial for this week, which is about taxation. Interesting parts of taxation, not the ones that accounting mostly deals with, but how economics deals with taxation and who actually pays the burden of a tax that is imposed on every product. And then in the end, we will talk about a very interesting case study, super interesting, about markets of human organs. Okay, this will be like a very nice presentation that you can see that it could be something similar to what you will guys decide to do as your project, like along those lines of presentation and analysis and methodology will also be your group study, and therefore this you can take it as a presentation of how your report should kind of look like. So let's get started with analyzing monopoly, not the game that is in the photo, but we will talk about the market structure that is the monopoly. So a monopoly is a market when some specific assumptions hold. So there's only one seller, but many buyers. So contrary to the perfect competition that we have many sellers, here we have a single seller. You will see just these assumptions makes a great deal of difference with respect to what perfect competition is. The second one is that the product has no close substitutes. There is no product that has no substitutes. So sometimes the substitutes are really similar, like for example, Coca-Cola and Pepsi. A lot of people consider that they are pretty close to how they taste or how cool each one of those is. Cars, like for example, Honda and Toyota, you can say that they are pretty similar. Of course, people, they do differentiate between the two, but they consider them substitutes. If the price, or if I like, for example, Honda and the price of Honda goes way up, I may want to shift and buy Toyota because it will be a much better deal for me, particularly in this particular period. So there is substitution. There are some products, the substitution is not that easy in general. Like for example, what is a substitute for petroleum? As I said in a previous example, in my country, in Greece, we use petroleum in order, at least we used to use petroleum in order to heat places. So my mom used to say that the best substitute for petroleum is to wear a sweater. So if you wear a sweater, we'll need to turn down the heat, so we'll consume less petroleum, and therefore you actually substitute petroleum oil with a sweater. So even there is this kind of not very close substitution, but these two things, that a sweater and petroleum, look very different, but they do cover indeed the same need. Even in other goods, like for example, this example, the usual example that textbooks have and a lot of professors refer to, is a medication for something specific, like a life-threatening disease that has only one medication that one company produces in this particular country, and it will be impossible to find any other solution. So in this case, if you have this disease, you either get this medication, which is your only hope to get better, or else you die. And in this case, you say that this is something that has no substitutes, period. Well, in reality, it happens many times. People, they do not want to take the medication. Even in this case, they prefer to do something else, like, for example, to pray. Okay, so even in this case, there are substitutes for almost everything. But in some goods, it's easier to substitute them than others. So in terms, for example, of oil, the oil-producing countries, we consider that they have a monopoly because it's not very easy. Like, for example, I can use a sweater in terms of heating, but I cannot use a sweater to take me from the one place to another if my car doesn't have gasoline in it. All right, so there is substitution, but substitution sometimes is close, sometimes it's a more difficult deal, and we consider that the monopoly is when there are no close substitutes. Also, there exists barriers to entry. Barriers to entry can be of many kinds, but the first thing that I want you to understand, and this is very serious because it will teach you to start evaluating what the information given to you actually tells you. So when I start with this and I tell you that there is barriers to entry, in this case, you know that there is no freedom for a firm that is outside of this business to enter the business, to enter the industry. So this is hard now because there are barriers. And then you can think, why do firms that they are outside of this particular industry want to enter the industry? And one word comes in mind, cake. Okay, so they see the profit and they want to enter. And once they enter, profit starts being eliminated. When does this happen? We said last time that it happens in the long run period. So this assumption here tells us that in the long run period, this cannot happen anymore. So actually, when you see that there are barriers of entry, the first thing that your brain should tell you is that what happens in the long run period is not different with what happens in the short term period. Because if you have profit in the short term, you can maintain this profit in the long run just because there's nobody to come and take it. There are barriers to entry. The firms that they can enter, we consider here for the sake of the strictness, of the concreteness of the model, that is impossible for somebody to enter. But even in reality, there are some cases, I will show you just in a little bit what those are. There are some cases that make it difficult to enter, but in the end, it's not impossible. In theory, we assume that this is almost impossible for somebody else to enter in this industry. So, what are the barriers of entry? First of all, we have some kind of legal barriers, like patents, like copyright, like licensing and stuff like that. If you patent something, then this means that for at least 25 years, 20 in most cases, in some other cases 25, in some other cases, especially in the US and especially for pharmaceuticals, you can have a patent almost forever by just making minor changes and refiling for patent. In the European Union, And from what I know in Singapore, this doesn't happen, but in the United States happens a lot, and we will see some cases in a little bit, perhaps in the next lecture, why this happens a lot. Copyright. So if, for example, I have these slides, you can see here they are copyrighted, meaning that another instructor cannot take my slides and pose as a good instructor with my slides. Okay, so they have to take my permission in order to do that. So meaning that this is a barrier of entry because I have a copyright for example, in a movie or in a book or in my slides or something like that. Somebody cannot take this particular work and actually republish it. So this is a barrier of entry that has to do with legal limits that institutions in a society set. And then in the end, we also have licensing, which means that if I have a copyright or if I have a patent, I can license it out to one person in a specific country. Like, for example, I can license Johnny in Hungary and to be distributing my slides in Hungary and to be the only one who distributes my slides in Hungary. Okay, so this means that he has a monopoly on that particular work there, and he can sell it. He can be the only one who sells it there. There are other reasons. One very cool reason is economies of scale and market size. Okay, this is a little difficult to understand, so try to focus, and I will try to focus to say it as clear as possible. So, in some cases, you need to be, as a firm, you need to be substantially big in order to drop the cost down to some tolerable level, okay, to be able to function, all right? So you have to have the necessary economies of scale. The size will give you the economies of scale. So you have to have a size that will give you the economies of scale in order to drop the cost at tolerable for the market levels. And also, the market is not very big. So once you have this size, it's not easy for somebody else to develop the same size, because if you have two firms of very big size that they need to produce, of course, a lot in order to meet the economies of scale and lower the cost, the market will not be large enough in order to be able to take it. Here's an example that will make it much more clear, I hope. Most cities in the world, most capitals in the world, with very few exceptions of usually huge megacities, like, for example, New York, Moscow, Mexico City, and many other very big, like tens of millions of people living there. So normal capitals of the world, they tend to have a single airport. Now, in order for an airport to function, you need economies of scale. You need the airport to be big. If you have a big airport, it means that it can actually handle a lot of flights, and even though the airports have very huge fixed costs, because they handle a lot of flights, the cost is actually distributed to many passengers along those flights, and therefore you can keep the cost down. Now, if you wanted to have a second airport in the same city, this will make the production of the passengers that they go to each airport, much lower in every airport. So the two airports will not be able to break even in this particular case, and then this market, again, they will tend either to merge, or one will go out of business and the other one will remain in the market. So because the economies of scale need you to be big, and the market cannot take more than one big firm. In other words, it doesn't have the demand, the necessary demand, high demand, in order to be able to allow the two firms to serve this demand. Therefore, in this case, we tend to have a monopoly, and in some particular cases that we are going to talk about in 2 lectures from today, we name those monopolies natural monopolies, but not always. Not always, okay? So, the other case is access to resources. Like, for example, if you do not have access to a particular resource, then you cannot sell something. So if, let's say, I produce electricity from carbon, then in this case, I will go around and I will buy all the mines that they produce carbon, coal, and because I'm going to be the only owner of coal in this particular area, then I will not sell coal to anybody else who wants to produce electricity. So I will be the only producer of electricity in this case, just because I own the coal. Now, of course, there might be hydroelectric ways to produce electricity. There might be nuclear ways. There might be several other ways. But in this case, because I hold the resource, I will be very close and it will be easier for me to maintain a monopoly in the end. Network goods. Network goods are very interesting because network goods are goods that, in order for you to get utility from those particular goods, you require that other consumers also will be consuming them. A very good example of a non-network good is an apple. So the fruit, I mean, not the computers and the phones. So you buy an apple from the supermarket, and then you eat the apple, and you enjoy the apple, and you don't care if everybody else is consuming an apple or not. But when, for example, you download Telegram, you download it because what gives you utility is that other users already use it. The fact that you want to have an account on LinkedIn is not because it gives you a utility unless anybody else has also LinkedIn or is using LinkedIn. Sometimes when we want to go to a bar in the evening, back in the time when this was a thing and we used to do it, so we would choose places, because when you go out to go to a bar, usually you want to see other people. You don't go there to be just by yourself, right? So when you go there, you expect some people to be there, so you will tend to prefer places that they already have some other patrons there, and you will be among some other people and you can socialize in this case. So we tend to see that, for example, nightclubs, it happens all the time. If you go to some places that they have, it's a district of the nightclubs, you will see that some nightclubs are super packed. There's like no way for more people to get in. And then the nightclubs that they are next to them, they are almost empty. And this is because this is a strongly network good, and people want to go there just because there are other people there and they can socialize. So right now, for example, Facebook, it's very easy to be a monopoly because it already has this network effect, meaning that a lot of people are on Facebook. So it means that it's not in danger from a very similar network that will actually become an anti-Facebook unless something happens and Facebook automatically becomes not very cool anymore. But as long as Facebook is there, why should I go on something that will be like, for example, I don't know how might this be called, and I will go to another social media that nobody is there already, or people are not as much in this one as they are in the other one. So you see here that if you already have the necessary size in the production of a network good, the customers already on your side, it will be very easy for you to maintain monopoly in this case. If this is a non-network good, then it doesn't matter. Like, for example, I do not care if most people drive Nissans, or the most people drive, for example, Hyundais, or the most people drive Toyotas, to what kind of car I will buy. Once this particular company is already present in the country and can offer some decent after-sale service, I do not care that much what other people drive. I'm going to get the car that I like the most, because this is not so much a network good. While when I will decide what kind of application I will download to communicate with others, I will choose according to what others are using. Like, for example, there is a very popular application for communication in Greece, in my country, that is called Viber. And Viber is exactly a copy of WhatsApp. It's a little more fancy in terms of it has more stickers, and the stickers move, has these like bears that they open their mouth and hearts come out and stuff like that people tend to love, because that's what you need when you communicate with somebody, bears that they throw hearts. And most people use that. So if you go to Greece and you say, okay, so I use WhatsApp and I use Telegram, most people will not have those applications on their phone. So you will tend to actually stop using those and go on Viber, so you will be able to keep communication with those people. You cannot require that, okay, guys, so now I am here, so you all use Telegram because I came. If this would work, once I came to Singapore, I would be like, you guys drive on the opposite side. I don't know if they told you before, but from tomorrow you should be changing because this thing here gets me dizzy. You don't do it correctly. All right, so this is something that is called network good, and this creates a monopolistic effect as well as all the previous ones. Now, some characteristics of the monopoly. The monopolist is the entire market supply. So the monopoly serves the entire market. It's not like the perfectly competitive firm that serves just a very, very small, negligible portion of the supply. The monopolist serves the entire thing. So you have no difference here in terms of market supply and the monopolist supply, and you have no difference also with market demand and the demand that the monopolist sees. So they are both the same thing because the monopolist is the entire supply side in this particular market. The monopolist, therefore, is not a price taker. There's nobody to give the monopolist the price. There's no market that's different than what the monopolist is in terms to give a price to the monopolist and say, okay, you take this price. If you sell above, good luck with it, nobody will buy from you. If you sell below, again, good luck, you're going to lose money. So this doesn't happen here. We have the monopolist to be able to set their own price. Now, when the monopolist sets a higher price, of course, the monopolist will sell less because it doesn't matter if there are many sellers or just one seller. When I demand something, I have my own rules of affordability, my own income, my own preferences, and I will not be paying no matter what price people ask me. Of course, I will forgo consuming the product in this case, which is pretty much what I do with many, many products. Like, for example, this is the reason why I do not drive a Lamborghini and I do not have my own private jet to take me every Friday evening to Greece to enjoy my coffee in Athens and then come back on Sunday night here in Singapore and work. The reason that I don't do those two things is not because I do not want, of course I want, but they do not belong to my feasibility set in terms of the price that they are set in this particular market. There are not many companies that they sell private jets and they do not come very, very cheap. So when a monopolist set a lower price, therefore, the monopolist will sell more, but the revenue per unit will decrease. It will decrease and will have like some profit loss, some revenue will be lost because the price is lower, but some revenue will come because more units will be produced. So we can see here that there is this tension between increasing the price, even if you are alone in the market. There is a tension in the market that if you tend to increase your price, then you gain more money from the people that they stay in the market. They are still buying your product, but you lose money from those that they are like, sorry, I cannot afford your product anymore. The opposite case happens if you lower the price. You gain some revenue because more people are priced in now. You lower the price so more people can afford the product. But even from those that would have stayed anyways with a higher price, now even from those you get a lower price per unit that you sell. So therefore you lose some money that these guys would have no problem to pay you the previous price already. So even though the monopolist is not the price taker, still the monopolist must consider what happens with the consumer demand. So the consumer demand actually is there and puts some limits to what the monopolist can get away with. And this is very important to have it in your mind. All right, so what happens with the marginal revenue? We saw again in the perfect competition that the marginal revenue is the price, because we had this example, if I remember correctly, because I filmed this like maybe a month ago. So we had this example with cups of coffee. If you have a coffee shop, which is many other coffee shops in the area, and people will not tolerate a higher price than the competition, so you sell your coffee, each cup, at the price, let's say $2. I think that was the price we had back then. So you sell $2 per cup. How much do you get from the first cup? The price, $2. How much do you get from the third? Again, the same. How much from the 50th? The same. How much if you sell 500 in a particular day that there is lots of customers? Again, the same. So marginal revenue is the price. This is because you as a seller, you do not make a big difference to the whole market. So by selling a lot for your standards, you do not affect so much the supply in the market, and therefore the market price will not change. You are too small to affect the price at the market level. Therefore, the good thing for you is that no matter how much you sell, you do not need to decrease your price in order to sell more. So the monopolist here serves the entire market demand. So what the monopolist does by definition is the market supply. Okay, so what the monopolist puts for sale, it's what? It's the entire quantity supplied. So by definition, the monopolist is one side of the market, so affects the market. So we should not expect that this will happen. So if a seller wants to sell additional units, wants to increase sales in this case, has to lower the price. You cannot convince people to buy your product given that the preferences have not changed, of course. So with the given preferences, ceteris paribus, you cannot convince people to buy more of your product unless you change the price in this particular case to decrease the price. Of course, you can do advertisement. But what is advertisement? Trying to change the preferences of people. Okay, so with not changing the preferences of people, the only thing you can do in order to improve your sales is to decrease the price. So the change in price will not be for the extra units that you want to sell. The change in price, the decrease in price should be for all units, because here we assume that price is one variable. We don't have multiple prices. In many cases, in many industries, there are multiple prices. There is a different price if you buy, let's say, the first pizza, and a different price if you buy the second pizza. The second pizza is 50% off, for example. Here, this means that there is a different price for the first pizza and a different price for the second unit of pizza. But we do not assume here that you are able to distinguish those consumers, that they will pay the first and the second price. We assume that you are a normal seller, you cannot charge multiple prices. There is a part of monopoly that is called price discrimination that deals exactly with that. In this course, we do not have the time to deal with this chapter at all, so therefore we will consider that there is a single price. So if you want to increase your quantity, you have to decrease the price. Let's now see an example about how this works. With a price of $5, you demand 0 units, $4 you demand 1 unit, price is $3, you demand 2 units, for price $2 you demand 3 units, and for price $1 you demand 4 units. And if, for example, the monopolist sets a price at $3, then in this case you will be demanding 2 units, and that's how much the monopolist will sell. So the monopolist will not say, I will set my price to $1 million and I want you to buy 1 million units. So the monopolist can set the price, but then how many people will consume the product will be reflected from the demand curve, and that's why for the monopolist the demand curve is super crucial. Now, if this particular monopolist would want to increase the sales from 2 units to 3 units, he would have to decrease the price, and particularly from this demand matrix that we have there, we can see that must decrease price to $2 for this to happen. Let's see what happens a little bit with the revenue. We can calculate the revenue for every cell of this particular matrix. So for example, for the first line, the revenue will be 5 times 0, because you sell 0 units at a $5 price, so this will give you 0 revenue. 1 times 4 is $4 revenue, 2 times 3 is $6 revenue, 3 times 2 is again $6 revenue, and 4 times 1 is again $4 revenue now. Now, since we have the information for the revenue, and we also have the information for the units here, from 0 up to 4 units, we have the revenue for all these 5 different observations, we can calculate also the marginal revenue. So for the first information, we cannot calculate anything marginal because it's the first observation that we have there, so this is non-applicable in this particular case. Then from 0 to go to 4, you need 4 units. From 4 to go to 6, you need 2 units. From 6 to remain to 6, you need 0 units. And from 6 to go to 4, you need minus 2 units. So this is how you calculate marginal revenue here. Therefore, we can say that in monopoly, the marginal revenue is below price, equal or smaller than price. I want to show you a very easy way to derive the marginal revenue to make your life much easier for all the homeworks, for the test, for the exam, for all the exercises. I will show you one way here that you can deal with the marginal revenue and calculate it very easily. Here's how it goes. So consider a linear demand. This is a demand function that is given to you as price equals something minus something times quantity. So this is usually how I give you demand curves. Like for example, even from the first homework, I gave you a demand curve that was P equals 10 minus 0.5 times Q. Okay, so we are giving this kind of demand from the very beginning of the year. So A and B stand here is the y-intercept and the slope, and I will not be giving you, of course, letters, I will be giving you numbers, but because I want to generalize here, I give you this A and B. So instead of A and B, you can put any numbers you want. For example, A can be 100 and B can be 2, let's say. All right, so you have this standard demand curve. It's a linear demand curve because it's a straight line. You remember this from the tutorial video number 1 that we presented how these straight lines actually work. And then if you want to plot it, of course, you will start from the intercept. The y-intercept is A. You will find wherever A is, because again, A will be a number, so you will locate it into the vertical axis, and then you will go down with B units per each unit of Q that you increase, and this means that you will have your demand graphed in this particular case. So you all know how to graph these equations. In case you forgot, again, check the tutorial video number 1 to refresh your memory. All right, so I do have my demand. Most of the times this will be given. Some cases I will not be even giving you the equation. I will just give you the line straight away. So you have this linear demand curve. How can you find the marginal revenue? If the demand curve is P equals A minus B times Q, then the marginal revenue will be equal to A minus 2 times BQ. In other words, you take the slope and you multiply it by 2 without, of course, changing its sign. It's a demand curve, has a negative sign, therefore the marginal revenue curve will also have a negative sign in this case. This means if I want to draw this particular curve, I will have to start from the same intercept, because the intercept of the demand and the marginal revenue is always the same. So I will start from the same intercept and I will go down with double the slope, which means that my marginal revenue will be a little more vertical than my demand. So it will actually go something like that. It will have double the slope, and therefore it will actually slice in the middle this distance from the origin up to the x-intercept. It will slice it in the middle, and this is how my marginal revenue will go. So in general, you can mathematically prove, and I'm not going to do that right here because we have much more interesting stuff to do. You can prove that when the demand is a straight line, meaning that your demand has a formula like the one given there, A minus B times Q, something minus something times the quantity. So if your demand is given to you like that, then your marginal revenue will be also a straight line, will start from the same intercept on the vertical axis. As you can see here, they both start from A, and third has double the slope. So I refer to this very often because we use it again and again and again. I refer to this as same intercept, double the slope recipe to get the marginal revenue curve. It's very easy. You just take the same intercept and you double the slope, and there you go with your marginal revenue. Very, very easy. Just you do it. It's the easiest thing that you can actually do in this course. Now, a very usual mistake sometimes, because we are going to have demand curves with various slopes, some of them will be very inelastic, some of them will be very elastic. So a very usual mistake in how you draw it is that students take the angle from the vertical axis and the demand curve, and they try to find the line that it's a dichotomous between these, it splits this angle into equal angles. This is not true. What you have to take the middle of is the horizontal projection. So you take this distance here and you find the middle of this distance, and that's how you draw it correctly. Now, how do we maximize profit in monopoly? Assume that this is your average cost and the marginal cost. In other words, I'm giving you here the cost system. It's a usual cost system like from the ones we see from lecture 2, nothing pretty fancy right here. The monopolist is also a firm. It has costs. It doesn't matter for the costs if you are a perfectly competitive firm or a monopoly firm. It matters that you are a firm and you produce. It doesn't matter if others are producing it or you are alone. Your cost is a cost. It's not going to be affected that much by that. And this is the demand from the consumers. And again, I make the marginal revenue curve here. Same intercept, double the slope, standard marginal revenue curve. And we know now that if this was a perfectly competitive market, you will get your equilibrium by locating the point where your demand, which gives you the price, is equal to the marginal cost, because the equilibrium condition in the perfect competition is price equals marginal cost. Price equals marginal cost. Price is given by demand. Marginal cost is given by the dark red curve here. Their intersection happens at A. So if you were a perfectly competitive firm, then you would sell quantity QC at a price equal to PC given there, because this is what maximization of profit tells you to do. Now, if you are a monopoly, you cannot do P equals MC anymore, because your marginal revenue is not equal to the price since you are a monopoly. This would be the case if you were a perfectly competitive firm. So what do? You revert to the generalized profit maximization condition. We derived it in lecture number 3, and we said that this is MR equals MC. This is why the marginal revenue curve is so interesting here. The marginal revenue curves, it tells you how much you make from each additional unit of product that you sell. And it's very necessary because we said that we have to, when we maximize the profit, it's important to compare how much is what comes in from selling an extra unit, compared to how much it goes out as a cost by producing an extra or selling an extra unit. And therefore, these two have to be equal in order to maximize the profit. If you do not remember that, revisit lecture 3 in order to get this part of the lecture correctly. So, marginal revenue equals to the marginal cost will be that point right here at B. But be careful, because a very common mistake that students make, and usually when I say this phrase, a very common mistake that students make, the first student that I observed making this mistake was myself, because I was making this mistake all the time. So you say, okay, so this is the quantity, then it means that we go here, we go from this intersection, the price is going to be there. Very wrong, very wrong. And if you just look at the graph a little more carefully, if you insist on that, you will see that, so the perfectly competitive firm will charge more than the monopolist. How is that possible? This doesn't make any sense. So it must be wrong, and indeed, it's definitely wrong. So the marginal revenue, if you go here, this will be the marginal revenue, the revenue of the last unit. What was the revenue that you got from the last unit if you were selling to the consumers the units in separate? But you are not doing that. You are taking the price from the curve that always gives you the price. Always gives you the price. This curve is the demand curve. See here, my price for the perfect competition comes from the demand curve. The same will happen for the monopoly. So I will have to take point B, project it up to the demand curve, and then the intersection with the demand curve from this projection will actually give me the price of the monopoly. The price of the monopoly will be higher than the price of perfect competition, which is natural because this guy can actually now set their own price and therefore can very well increase the price a little bit to get more money and to maximize the profit at a better maximum than the perfectly competitive firm can ever achieve. Now, if we consider the cost of this seller, we can figure out what the profit is. That's very easy to do because you are selling quantity QM. Since you are selling quantity QM, you project QM up to the average cost. Up to the average cost will give you this point here, and this point here is the average cost, the cost per unit. If you multiply the cost per unit by the units, you will get that this is your cost. Now, the revenue for all units will be all this square right here, or this rectangle right here. So what remains is the profit of the monopoly. So the profit of the monopolist gets price PM, the cost is down here. You take this is the cost per unit, you multiply it by the units, and therefore you receive the total profit of the monopolist, which is this very, very light orange color that shows you what is the profit under the monopoly. If you do the same for the perfect competition, the cost for the perfect competition for quantity QC, the average cost will be given by, again, the AC, and then this blue area that also overlaps a little bit with the light orange area is the profit for the perfectly competitive firm. Now, because this graph is carefully drawn and it corresponds to perhaps a real case, you can see that obviously you prefer to be a monopolist than to be a perfectly competitive firm. And if it was better to be a perfectly competitive firm, then the monopolist would not set price PM. The monopolist is a monopolist, can set their own price. The monopolist would select price PC if PC would give more profit. If PC would be the maximum profit ever, the monopolist would also adapt it, but we see that the monopolist deviates and goes to a higher price PM, because obviously at PM is better because the light orange square is much bigger than the blue area there. So profit under monopoly will always be higher. Price under monopoly will always be higher. That's what monopolies are renowned for, that they increase the price. They try to take advantage of their position as a unique seller and to increase the prices. And also something that is very important and will get you out of a lot of mysterious situations with the task and everything, very useful piece of knowledge here, is that how does the monopolist can get away by charging higher prices? By limiting quantity. So the monopolist limits quantity, and because you limit quantity, you can climb higher on the demand. If you sell, for example, QC, you have to go to A if you want to price. If you want to sell quantity QC, you can only sell it at an average price of A, of PC here, at the height of A. If you, however, restrict quantity to QM, then you can climb up and you can go to a point like C, and at a point like C, then you sell less, and therefore you can offer it at a higher price, and consumers will take it because you rule out these poorer or not very strong preference consumers, and you sell only either to wealthy or to the enthusiasts that they do the job there. All right, let's see an example to make everything a little more realistic and to see how this works technically. This is an example that will allow you to see how everything works and how everything comes to place. All right, so assume that you have a monopolist that faces a demand P equals 10 minus 2 times Q. So here A is 10 and B is minus 2. And then I also give you the marginal cost, which here is not a U-shaped marginal cost, is constant, just to be easier to solve this particular problem. So the MC is equal to 2. Now, one thing that will be very useful for you to know, another very useful piece of knowledge, is that when the MC is constant, is not changing, is not U-shaped, is constant, is given by just a number, like for example here MC equals 2, then in this case the AC is also constant and is the same with the MC. So MC is equal to AC when MC is constant, and they are both equal to the same number. Why is that? Because if my cost of each extra unit is 2, 2 for the first, 2 for the second, 2 for the third, 2 for the millionth, then this means that the average will also be constant if the marginal is constant. So my marginal cost is 2, which means also I can write it down if I want that my AC will also be 2. So let me have my graph here and I will make it exact so everything will show me if I'm doing the correct thing or I have a mistake. So this is my demand curve, starts from 10, goes down by 2 units for each unit of Q. Very cool. And then a constant curve that will be my marginal cost. That's very easy to draw. I go at 2 and I just make a horizontal line. So this is my MC and also, as we said again, the AC. So the marginal revenue now will be very easy to do here. All right, so this is like the easiest part. We'll start from 10, that's the easiest thing, and we'll go down. If I have the same graph, we'll go down here and we'll this hits at 5, so this will go at 2.5. But before I do that, let me do it numerically. Let me derive the equation for the curve and then I will see if my guess is the correct one. So my marginal revenue will be 10, same intercept, minus double the slope. The slope of the demand is minus 2. So 2 times minus 2 is minus 4. So my marginal revenue will be 10 minus 4 times Q. All right, that's cool. Another thing that I want you to observe, before I forget, I have told you already, but a lot of students come up and they ask me all the time. I use two different letters to denote quantity, capital Q and lowercase q. If I have a capital Q, I mean that this is a quantity for the entire market. And here, it doesn't matter, it's the same because the monopolist is the entire market, so I use capital Q. If I use a lowercase q, which I usually do in perfect competition and some other forms of markets that we will do in the next lecture, so I use a lowercase q there, and this distinguishes that this is a quantity of a firm, not the quantity that all firms put together into the market. All right, so we have 10 minus 4Q, which is the marginal revenue there. So this means that I will start from 10 and I will go down 4 units for each 2 times Q. This means that there you go, it hits at 2.5 exactly in the middle. Now the equilibrium condition tells me that MR equals MC. This means that my MR is 10 minus 4Q, my MC is equal to 2. This will give me 10 minus 2 because I'm passing the 2 on the other side and I'm sending the 4 times Q on the other side. So I will have everything involving Q on the right here and everything not involving Q on the left. And this usually I want it on the other side, but this is how it helps me now because I didn't want to have two negative things in each part. Now I will put them on the right side. 4 times Q equals 10 minus 2, that's 8. And then I can divide both sides by 4, and I will understand that my quantity is 2. And this is something that you can see because MR equals MC does indeed occur at a quantity of 2. You can also see at the projection of point A in my graph. Then I take my demand curve that will give me the price, because look at the formula of the demand curve. What does this formula say? Price equals that. So this is the price giver function. This is the price giver machine that I can use in order to find out the price. So now I know the quantity. I will plug it in this machine. So 10 minus 2 times 2. Don't forget here, multiplication goes before subtraction. Okay, so I have to do 2 times 2 equals 4. 10 minus 4 equals 6. So I'm going to have a price of 6 for this quantity of 2 that I will sell. If I project A above to my demand curve, you will see that this occurs exactly at 6, and this is how you derive this equilibrium for the monopoly. It's very easy. Now my profit will be equal to 6, which is the price, minus 2, which is the average cost, times the quantity, which is also 2. This will give me a profit of 8 for the monopolist. Now, let's try to check here what is going on to not lose it. Why do we have AC to be minus 2? How do I know that? I know it because MC equals also 2. Now, why is my profit equal to price minus MC times the quantity? Because price minus average cost will be how much profit you gain for each unit you sell. And then, if you multiply that with a number of units, you will receive your total profit. So price minus AC is the profit per unit multiplied by the units will give you the entire profit, and this is a very easy way to get your profit if these are the information that you have already. All right, so here is the area of the profit. So this means that if I want to calculate this geometrically now, this is a square, and when you want to calculate the area of a square, what you do is you multiply one side by another. This side is from 0 to 2, so it's 2. And this side is from 2 to 6, so it's 4. 2 times 4 will give me 8, which, look at that, such a coincidence. 8 I have here. All right, so this shows you the correspondence of this super difficult math with the geometry of the graph. They just correspond perfectly in both cases. Now, if this was a perfectly competitive market, with the same information I can see what would happen if this was not the only firm, but there were many, many other firms in this market. If this was a competitive market, my equilibrium condition is that P equals MC. My price is given always by the demand curve. That's 10 minus 2Q, my demand curve. And this would be equal to MC. MC is given to be 2. So 10 minus 2Q equals 2. I can write that as 2Q equals 8. If I do the calculation there, I transfer the minus 2Q on the other side, and it becomes 2Q. And then the 2 I transferred on the other side, so it becomes 10 minus 2 equals 2Q. So 2Q equals 8. I divide both by 2, so my quantity would be 4 units here. And then I can go to my graph and I will do P equals MC. P is given by my demand curve. This is my demand curve. This is MC. So P equals MC will be here. And this happens exactly at point C that I have 4 units. Then the price would be again given by the demand curve. 10 minus 2 times 4, which is the quantity now for perfect competition. This would be equal to 2 as well. So price, we already know P equals MC, and therefore price would be equal to the MC, which is 2. I just went like the long way to calculate it here to show to everybody that the same methods work no matter what. And the profit would be price minus your average cost. 2 minus 2 is 0. Times 4 will also give you 0. So in this particular case, P equals MC gives me no profit. So this guy just gets a salary and the normal return for the capital, nothing above and beyond. But the monopolist gets the same salary, gets the same normal return for the capital, plus 4 extra units of profit. Careful, plus 8 more units of profit, which is always good. So you get your salary, you do get the normal return for your capital that will get, like, let's say if you just deposit the money in the bank, and now you get 8 more units, that is what profit is. That's the above and beyond the things that they are opportunity cost for you. All right, so this is the example. It puts everything into place. I would recommend that you do make a reasonable effort to understand everything here because, first of all, this is not difficult. And here is another thing. When you look at this slide right away, so you open your notebook and you see that you have a printout of this slide and it has all these numbers and everything, you're like, oh my God, what is that? Like, what is all these numbers? But that's not how you see math. All right, when you take a book, you don't open the book and you say, oh my God, this has so many words. You start reading from the beginning because we tend to not be scared of words. But we also tend to be scared of math because we see it like as a monster in front of us. But if you start from the beginning, you see here that these are calculations that even a little kid can actually follow. So don't be scared of it. It's easier sometimes to do it with a math. Some other times it's much easier to do it with a graph. But in general, you will see that both methods are not difficult at all to understand, to follow, and to actually do them by yourself. And I can tell you that the success rate of people who tried and they were able to pull this off, to do it like perfectly, is 100%. Actually, it's more than 100% because even some people who do not try can actually do that. Not many, but still some of them who do not try, it's so easy that they can do it. So don't be scared of it. Just try to follow it, give it a chance, and you will see that you're above it. All right. Now, in reality, applying the MRMC method to set the price may be impractical for the seller. Like, it's okay if you are a very big seller and you are selling like, let's say $1 million worth of sales every year, every week, or even year. This is a sufficient amount to be able to have to hire a good economist and everything to be able to derive proper demand curves and pay companies, consulting companies to do surveys to be able to understand what is going on with your demand and with your supply and with everything, to have all this information that will allow you to fine-tune your pricing and everything much better. But in general, the vast majority of firms, they do not make $1 million a week or $1 million per year. They do make just a living for the people that they operate them, and they still have to do pricing and they still have to do profit maximization. How do they do it? Well, they do it because there is a very easy shortcut, a rule of thumb, something much easier than ever having to deal with supply and demand. It's a method that almost every seller who knows what they are doing, no matter what is their knowledge of economics, they do tend to follow this. So instead of applying MR equals MC, there is a shortcut, a rule of thumb, that can be applied in practice. And this is that MR equals MC, mathematically, intuitively, economically, and in all ways, it is equivalent to a much simpler expression. That is, P minus MC over P equals the negative of 1 over the elasticity. And you will be like, what? Are you out of your mind? How can this be more simple than that? That's just like 4 letters, inequality in between. And here you have fractions and negative and stuff like that. Like, are you out of your mind? What is going on? No. This is indeed much simpler. And I will tell you in a moment why it is simple. But before you understand that it's simple, you have to figure out what it is. So what is price minus cost over the price? Okay, do you remember when we had in the elasticity calculation something minus something else over the first something? This was what? It was a percentage difference. Okay, so here, this percentage difference is actually our profit margin. So the first side, the left-hand side, LHS here, it stands for profit margin. And the other side, it's the 1 over the elasticity of demand. 1 over the elasticity of demand is a measurement that very few salespeople or owners of small businesses will be able to give you, but actually it amounts to the how can I get away with by setting the price. So if you go to a small seller that you will be 100% sure that they do not understand formal economics, and you ask them, what is your profit margin? They will be able to give you a percentage. Like I remember when I was a kid, I had a friend that his dad had a store that he was selling motorbike accessories. And I had this natural curiosity. His dad, every time I was going to the store, like they had like so many things in the store. More than 1,000 products they were selling in this little store. And I asked him, like, how do you decide about the prices? And it impressed me because I could observe that if I would go from this store to another store, or even in a supermarket and then in another supermarket, they do have very similar prices. So they do come up with something reasonable. They don't say, oh, what is this? This is a helmet for a motorbike. How much should I sell it? $100,000. No, they don't come up with these kind of irrational prices. They come up with very reasonable prices that people are buying these products, and they make a living. So how do they do it? And he told me that, yes, that's a good question. I asked my dad, and he said that in these kinds of products, we are actually selling them 25%. And I said, what do you mean 25%? 25% above of what we buy them. But then we have these others that nobody else sells, and then those we do 35% over. And then we have some others that these are not very expensive, so they come, like we buy them in bulk and they come very cheap to us. So in some of them that we do up to 150% up. So if you go, for example, to buy like a set of small screws that they cost like what, 5 cents, you're gonna pay $1 to them for them because they just feature the product. You can go there and the convenience of buying it from there is really worth a lot. You are not gonna drive to the center of the city or go to the source just to go buy a set of screws. All right, so actually, this is what you can get away with. The percentage that you can get away with is something that you have a feeling for, and this is always related to the elasticity. So for example, if you go to the hawker center and you get one of the vendors and you tell them, okay, so how much is your profit margin? If they want to tell you, because sometimes they avoid to do that, but if they want to tell you, they will tell you that this is how I price. I calculate my cost per plate, and I do price it by checking how much above I can. But they do this, be careful, they do this if their product has some monopoly power, meaning that it's not perfectly competitive. If it's perfectly competitive, you don't need to do that. You just price at whatever price is in the market. But if you do have some of your own market power, there's no super easy substitution around you. Like, for example, chicken and rice will not be a monopolistic product in a hawker center unless you are like this amazing cook that yours is actually renowned to everybody that's better quality. Remember, we talked about homogeneity and heterogeneity of products sometime before. So it's much easier to set your profit margin to whatever you can get away with. What can you get away with? You have a feeling for that in the market, and this feeling is 1 over your elasticity. You never give it a number as elasticity inversed, but you do understand intuitively how much you can get away with. So the left-hand side is the profit margin as a percentage of the price, and the right-hand side is how much you can get away with. So profit is maximized either when MR equals to MC, but also equivalently when the profit margin is set equal to the inverse of the negative of the elasticity of demand. If, for example, your elasticity of demand is -4, the feeling that you are going to have is that the profit margin will be -1 over -4, 25%. So this is the feeling that my friend's dad had for those particular products, and he was selling them for 25%. Now, the feeling is not just a feeling, it's something that the market also can tell you. If you set the price too high, at some point you will see that you're not selling too much. You will start probably lowering the price, or else you are not going to maximize your sales. So you don't need to know your marginal revenue in order to be able to set price in a monopoly. All right, let's now discuss what happens with a supply decision in monopoly. In perfect competition, we know that the marginal cost itself is the supply curve for this particular market. So the perfectly competitive firm uses its marginal cost curve as a supply curve. In monopoly, however, things may be different. And the reason that is different is that now you are not given a price, you actually set your own price. When you set your own price, you do it when MC equals MR. In other words, you are interested in 2 different things. The first thing is your cost. Of course, you are interested in your cost. You cannot just start producing without knowing what the cost situation is, because that's not the best way to make money if you do not understand how your cost behaves. The second thing you care for is the demand. The demand is what yields the marginal revenue curve. So you care for how much of this production can be absorbed in the market at a decently high price, so it will give you good revenues and maximum profit. So in PC, the market supply curve is determined by marginal cost. How this is going to work for the monopoly optimal output is determined by the marginal cost and the shape of the demand curve, which yields the marginal revenue curve. So what is the supply curve in a monopolistic situation? Now, the shape of the supply curve in a monopoly looks exactly like a unicorn. So it looks like a unicorn because the common thing between the unicorn and the supply curve of the monopoly is that they both do not exist. Okay, and the reason that I come up with the example with a unicorn is that sometimes I ask you, what is going to happen to the supply curve of a monopoly if that happens? And students tend to try to really understand what's going to happen to the supply curve, forgetting that a supply curve doesn't exist, cannot be defined in a monopoly. So I use the example with a unicorn because then they tell me, no, you never said that. And I was like, do you remember the example with a unicorn? And they're like, oh, right. Okay, so be careful here because it's a very common mistake. All right, so there is no supply curve for the monopolistic market. And let's try to examine this and see exactly why this cannot happen. Let me show you a little bit how things work, remind you how things work in perfect competition. This is my cost system, and then this is the demand curve for the firm, that MC equals MR or P equals MC in this particular case yields point A because the perfectly competitive firm is a price taker in this situation. So for PA, I produce QA. Then for PB, my intersection moves lower, so I will produce QB. For PC, I will have an intersection at C, so I will produce QC. And then if I go below my AVC, I will not produce anything there. So this means that the intersection is at D, but I will not produce anything there because I will prefer to shut down, if you remember the discussion that we had in the other side. So we see here that the marginal cost curve actually is used, as we said, as a supply curve, but not the entire marginal cost curve, only the part that is above the AVC. So if I want to plot the supply curve for the perfect competition, I will just do like that, and it will be the part of the MC that is above the AVC curve. Now, if I try to do the same in monopoly, let's see where this is going to show me that the supply curve doesn't exist. So here is my MC again. Now I don't need the AVC here. Let me just bring my demand, the entire demand of the market. Now I'm setting the price. I'm not a price taker anymore. So this is my marginal revenue for the demand curve DA. I will have another one, demand B, later. That's why I denote them like that. So I will always target for the MR equals MC point right here. And then I will reflect it upstairs to the demand curve. And this will give me the price. Okay, so everything works exactly like that. For PA, I will produce QA. Now, let's see what happens if I changed my demand back here. Let me try to do the same right there. So let me create a new demand. So I move my demand up and I increase my demand here. And that's why I told you last time that you have to check for systems of curves and not for just curves themselves, because you can see here that the demand curve comes also as a system with a marginal revenue curve. We saw that the cost system looks like the Greek letter psi, that looks something like that. And then the demand curve looks like rappers do, like yo, and that's at least that's what I think that they do. And you can see here that it moves the entire system. If my demand moves, the marginal revenue will go together. So here, if you see the green system and the purple system, then you actually don't see 5 curves, but you see just a cost and a demand that has moved, and that's much easier for your eye to see if you are trained to see systems. So again, now I will go to MRB equals MC, which is right here, and I will reflect this upstairs, so I will get my price, which is again the same. So you see here that is possible, not always the case, but it's possible that for a different quantity, you will have the same price. Actually, you can get for the different price, you can also get the same quantity. So you do not have a one-to-one relationship between price and quantity supplied in the monopoly. You have a relationship that goes all over the place. It's not a nice line like this one that follows a uniform behavior. It can be one equilibrium can be here, the other here, then it can move, for example, there, and the price will be moving to different places up and down, so you will not get a normal curve. You will get just a cloud of different points that you will not be able to connect into a one-to-one relationship between price and quantity supplied, and that's why we say that it does not exist a supply curve in a monopoly situation. So in monopoly, shifts in demand do not trace a supply relationship as in perfect competition. A shift from a demand to another may lead to a decision to supply different quantities for the same price, or different prices for the same quantity, and many other non-uniformities as we would see in the marginal cost equal price situation of the perfect competition. All right, so let's discuss a little bit about market power. So let's assess a little bit what market power is. We measure market power by the extent to which price can be set above MC. So a perfectly competitive firm has zero market power because its price cannot deviate for MC. In monopoly, this can happen, as we have seen already. Your price is always above your MC, so you do have market power. So market power is defined as to how higher your price is above your MC. So the profit margin the firm is able to get away with shows the market power of this firm. Now, a convenient index of market power is the profit margin. So this was defined in 1934 by Abba Lerner. It was a convenient way to define how much market power you have by what percentage above MC you can price. It's a way to measure the market power in different industries and to get estimates. And we know that according to the shortcut that we saw before, the P minus MC over P should be equal to 1 over ED, given that this particular firm wants to maximize its profit. And this is important because, again, this is a profit maximization condition. It doesn't have to hold, but it has to hold if the company wants to maximize the profit, or else the profit will be something less than maximum. What happens if you have more than one firms? Like, let's start breaking a little bit our assumption, water them down a little bit, and see what will happen. So pure monopoly is a very rare case. It happens like a real pure monopoly happens extremely rarely. You must have something like a prohibition, so nobody can make this product. Maybe only the government can offer it or something like that. Like, for example, in Greece, the university education is something that only the government can do. There is a prohibition by the constitution of the country that you cannot have private universities, no matter what, no matter, like, if you make a university with all Nobel Prize winners in the world and you go to Greece, then this institution, if it's not run by the government, it cannot be considered a university. It will be considered something like an institution of higher education, but it doesn't it doesn't give you the advantages of the university degree. Okay, so in this case, if you want to have a university degree, you have to go to the governmental institutions, and the government has a pure monopoly in this particular case. But again, there are some substitutes to that. Like, for example, a lot of students that they do not pass the state exams to go to university, again, they can go to other countries. Very popular is Britain or France or Italy, and they go study there in most of the times private institutions that these countries have. So pure monopoly is a rare case at best. It exists, but it's a rare case. So still, the rule of thumb also applies This profit maximization method applies in industries that they have more than one firms, provided that there is some substitution between the products. Like the products are not exactly the same, but there exists some differentiation between the products. So the products are substitutable, but they are not exactly the same. There is some differentiation, so that the differentiation is what gives you a little bit of market power. Like, for example, when I go to buy beverages, I see that Coca-Cola is there, and then there are other different colas, and I will always want to buy Coca-Cola because I think that Coca-Cola is better. So even if Coca-Cola has a little higher price, I will tend to buy this particular brand just because I like it more. It's in my preference set as a superior product than the other products. All right, so if you have substitution but not perfect substitution, then in this case you still have a little bit of market power. Like, for example, again, Coca-Cola can deviate from the marginal cost and charge a higher price just because people like me will buy it, even though it is not as cheap as other colas that they can substitute Coca-Cola. So therefore, even with more than one firms, the rule of thumb applies exactly the same, with only a very important difference, however, that this elasticity of demand now does not refer to the product, does not refer to cola, refers to the particular brand. So this is the particular elasticity for that brand, not the elasticity of demand in terms of price for the entire range of products there. So if we have, for example, it's different, the elasticity of demand, the price elasticity of demand for cars, and the different elasticity of demand for Toyota cars or Mercedes cars. Okay, the brand has a different elasticity from the category of products in general. All right, so what happens with market power and profit? Market power does not guarantee profit. Market power is good indeed. It's good to be able to price above your marginal cost, but having market power doesn't guarantee profits unless you can keep your cost also down. So if the product has insufficient demand, monopolization will not help. And there are products that you have perfect monopoly in them just because you came up with the idea of these products and you are the only one producing them, because you may file for a patent and then nobody else is allowed in this particular market to make a product like yours. So by definition, in this case, you have a perfect monopoly, but this doesn't guarantee that you will have profit, because being the only person that produces a particular product doesn't make it so that you will have profit, or doesn't make it that people will want to buy this product just because you are the only one who produces it. I saw the other day, I went to the store and I have an old iPad, and I wanted to buy a new case for it because the old one was not very convenient. And they had many cases for iPads, and also I looked online and I saw even more. And they have some amazing ideas. Like these people, they come up with some ideas. Unfortunately, my iPad is old and it doesn't support most of them. But I saw one that was very interesting. Like the cover of the iPad was also a battery, and you could charge it, and then there was a little cable, and you could plug it into your iPad, and then it could charge your iPad if it runs out of battery. So that was very clever. And then there was another one that was not as clever, but I also liked it. And this was one that you had the iPad on the one side, and then the cover also had a normal paper pad, which I don't know why do you need to have an iPad, electronic pad, and a paper pad, because I thought that the iPad's purpose was to not need to have a paper pad anymore, because the iPad is the electronic, but anyway, so it had like the paper pad on the other side. And then there was another one that had a keyboard. This was the one that my iPad didn't support. So you open it and you make it a laptop. And that's one way for them to have it at the price that is more than a laptop, so you can actually use it as a laptop with a fake little plasticky small keyboard that you can have. And there was like almost a case for and I was like, what is next? Like, what are they gonna do? Like one that has like an iPad on the one side, and then in the other one has like a place to put toilet paper because of in case of emergency or stuff like that. And then I thought that this is a stupid idea, but I saw that this product actually exists. So I don't know what kind of statement you want to make if you take this case for an iPad and you put it in your bathroom. Maybe you want to tell something to your guests that they come home, like, so here's the stand for the toilet paper, and also, guess what? It takes an iPad. I guess that the life of this product would be like you buy it for a present for somebody, and we would be like, oh, here's the present. Oh my God, that's so funny. Okay, good. What else? Okay, and that's pretty much how this is gonna go down, and that's the amount of money that you will pay for that. $39.99 will just have a use of making a joke like that will last for 15 seconds or something. Or like this product that I found, unicorn meat, which is like, I don't know who would like believe that you can buy unicorn meat because this is obviously fake. And like everybody knows that unicorn meat is not red, is totally white. Like how could you imagine that unicorns could have red meat? So profit depends on the average cost relative to price. If your average cost is above price, doesn't matter if your marginal cost is way below, you are not gonna make profits, you're gonna make losses. So it doesn't matter if you're a monopolist unless you can take care of your costs to be low and be able to find support in the market in terms that the market will tolerate a higher price for that. Because if you sell any of these products to a very high price just because of monopoly, people will not be that crazy to buy them just because they are stupid ideas. I have a range of such products, but I have time only to show you two. But there are so many stupid products out there. Like I could spend 6 hours of video only on that. So a firm may have high market power but low profits or even losses due to high average cost. So if you don't take care of your cost, market power will be of secondary importance. Of course, market power is not bad at all to have. All right, so let's see the example. Supermarket versus the convenience store. So supermarkets are big retailers that they are in a neighborhood, like in a central position in a neighborhood, and there is access there for most of the neighborhood, but most people, they have to travel a significant distance in order to get to the supermarket, while the same thing doesn't happen with a convenience store. The convenience stores are usually conveniently, that's where the name is coming from, conveniently located near you, and that's the part of the convenience. Also, they are very small. They have small quantities of the things that you need most. You walk in, you walk out in 2 minutes. That's the easiest thing. While if you want to enter to the supermarket, it will take you like from the one aisle to another. It might take you like 5 minutes to go like the whole distance if you want to find something. Sometimes it's extremely difficult unless you know the supermarket from before. So the supermarkets have cheaper prices. The convenience stores are more expensive, which shows you a little bit the idea who has more market power in this case. It takes more time to shop at the supermarket, while the convenience store conveniently is faster. It's usually further away from customers. Well, I understand that some of you have supermarket closer than the convenience store, but this doesn't happen with the majority of people. There are much more convenience stores than supermarkets, so I guess that the average person, the representative agent, will be much closer to a convenience store than to a big supermarket. So the store elasticity is calculated by researchers for a supermarket at -10, for a convenience store at -5. So the profit margin of the supermarket is 10%, the profit margin at the convenience store is 20%. Well, if you want convenience is a part of the business plan. we are selling convenience at the convenience store, and therefore you have to pay a little extra for the convenience. So the customer will tolerate higher price, so you can understand here that the convenience store has more market power and it's allowed to sell at a higher profit margin, not is allowed by any outsider, it's tolerated by the customers to be able to sell at a higher price. Supermarkets, on the other hand, they have usually higher profits because they have a higher volume of sales, and they also, because of economies of scale, because of the mass of sales and operation, they can keep the average cost much lower, so this allows them to have a higher profit. So you see here that market power is not synonymous to profit. They correlate, but one doesn't necessarily cause the other, and in some cases they might not coexist. All right, so the rule of thumb, one more time, it goes for any firm with market power. Now, in this case, ED is the elasticity of demand for the brand. We expect that elastic products will have a low markup, because by elastic we mean that the consumers do not tolerate such big increases in the price of these products without looking around to shop from somebody else cheaper, this product or a similar one. And then in elastic products we'll have a higher markup, just because since they are inelastic means that consumers do not care so much for the price, they will tolerate higher prices. And then we can see in two graphs how the two products will actually behave in terms of profit margin. So let's assume that the marginal cost is the same in both, and the elastic demand is D1, which yields a marginal revenue 1 in this particular case. And then the inelastic product has a much more vertical demand curve, D2, which has again an even more vertical marginal revenue. And if we hit the equilibrium for the first one, the elastic, we will see that this happens at A, where MR equals MC. This occurs at sales Q star. And at the same level, I conveniently made this in order to be able to compare. So again, Q star is the same quantity for the inelastic demand. So we have these two products that the equilibrium quantity is the same, but look what happens to prices in order to compare. Let's project A up to the demand curve, we go to B, and this gives us P1 star, and look at the projection of the inelastic product to the inelastic demand at B prime, and this yields equilibrium price of P2 star, which is much, much higher. So you can see here, if you consider the marginal cost, that the market power of these two products, it's very different. The markup or the profit margin is between MC and P1 star for the elastic demand, and this much bigger markup between P2 star and MC for the inelastic demand. So you see, just the elasticity or inelasticity of the product creates the situation with the market price of the two products and the markup to be entirely different. All right, how can you create market power? Market power is good. It doesn't solve all your problems as we saw, but it's good because it can allow you to have a much higher profit margin, given that the consumers will be interested in consuming your product. So how do you create the market power? Market power can be helped by actions of the seller. Let's see which ones they are. First of all, make your product better. So no matter if you are by yourself, if you have no competitors, if you want to try to make your product better, this will make your consumers to tolerate higher prices. So usually we are used to pay more money for products that we consider that they have better quality. How can you do that? Either do research and development, R&D, so do try to make the product in fact better, or do more advertising to convince people that your product is better than the others without making the actual product any better. So sometimes this happens a lot, It matters how the consumer perceives the product, not what actually the product is. Differentiate your product so that consumers cannot easily substitute it with another product. This will allow you to be able to have more market power. In other words, to charge more without losing your customers. Close the door behind you. That's important. Create barriers of entry so that potential competitors will keep out of your profits. And this is something that we see a lot happening, like actions that they have no other reason, actions that firms take, that they have no other reason than trying to create impediment to potential entrants. Like, for example, I will give you some information now on an example that many of you are not very familiar with. You don't know unless you have seen an article on that or something like that, but it's difficult to observe it on your own. Recently, I saw a press conference of some Premier League team in football. When I say football, I mean like this thing that the Europeans play, that they kick the ball with their feet, not the one that the Americans play, that they do not use their feet, but they still call it football for some reason. All right, so they said that, we invested and we have right now more than 100 contracts with different players. And you would think like, wait a second, in a football match, 11 players are playing, plus you have 3 substitutes in normal times, plus you can have like up to 18 people in the team for a particular match, sitting in the bench in total, with the 11 playing. So you can have like maybe 22, 23 people registered in the league, or even in Champions League. I think you can register up to 25 players, but not more. Why do these teams, they hold contracts, they pay normally some players that they never register in the team? So what actually they do is that they buy the players, they make contracts with them, so they belong to the team, and then they send them to play as loans in other teams. This, in some cases, a lot of people believe that is a process that gives profit to the team. Like, for example, I bought this player and I sent him play to a much smaller team somewhere far away, but the player belongs to me and is a loan, plays as a loan to another team. And the question is, do they make money from that? No, they don't. They actually lose money from that, because almost in the entirety of loan contracts, the team that accepts the player to play for them pays much less than this team has ever paid to where they bought this player, or how much the actual compensation for the player is. So the mother team actually always pay some part of the compensation of the player, even though the player plays to another team. Why does this happen? Why do teams buy so many players? The short answer is for a very simple reason, that by buying a player, you actually deprive other teams from buying this particular player. And you don't care so much about the teams that they are at your level, the top level. For example, if you are Manchester United or Manchester City or Arsenal or these other top teams, you don't care so much for your immediate rivals. What you care about is the teams that they are below you. So you want to make it so no matter how much money those teams put in the game, they will not have the access to players, because big teams have bought like all the good players around. So it will be extremely difficult for smaller teams to come and become like a part of the higher society of teams that they make the most profits. Okay, the same happens in Spain, the same happens in most leagues around the world. So you can see here that you have a behavior that is not profit maximizing. You actually lose money in order to keep the door closed behind you, so other teams will not come in and try to, from nothing, to create a team that will be another opponent for you in the future and will take some of your people that they support you and they pay you a lot of money and all this. Kill the competition. So in some cases, you, wait a second, legally, let me disclaim, not literally. You don't go out and kill people. Mafia did that. Mafia was an operation that did that a lot to kill the competition. But companies do that in general. We have seen it a lot. So they apply strategies that constrict the competition and they drive rivals out of business. So we see that, for example, the Facebook tries to buy a little firm, and then there was a little firm called Snapchat, and Facebook was very interested in buying them. They were trying again and again and again, and Snapchat did not like to sell to Facebook. So therefore, they threatened them and they told them that if you do not sell the firm to us, we will have Instagram, that belongs also to Facebook, to do exactly the same thing that you guys do, to replicate your business model. So either you sell to us or we'll destroy you like that. Snapchat never actually gave up. So Instagram stories were launched. Then the all growth of Snapchat was lost almost instantaneously in a few weeks. And we saw that this case now of Snapchat is a very renowned case of this kill the competition situation, which in this case, Facebook did that, and now it was not only useful for them because they have such a big revenue from all these Instagram stories that they are extremely popular, but also because they can use this story for other similar cases, be like, so do you want to sell to us, or you will go like Snapchat? So now you have a very good example of what is going on. And recently there was a hearing in July, I think, of 2020. There was a hearing in Congress in the US where one of the congressmen asked Mark Zuckerberg directly, why do you apply this kind of mafia tactics to your opponents? Like, why do you do that? So this is a particular way of trying to do that. So these are the three ways that you can actually create market power, and they all work. Now, in economics, we do not tend to speak about the ethical side of things. There are other sciences that they do that, and they do much better than economics. But what we actually do is we do not say which one is correct and which one is not, ethical, unethical, fair, unfair. What we can tell as economists is that this can be done and it does work. Now, if you want to allow it or not, it's something that doesn't have to do with the economists, it has to do with people that they do different jobs. So, sources of market power. Why do some firms have considerable market powers and others they have none? Because market power is determined by the ability to set price above MC, and what allows you to do that, we saw before, that is a crucial factor: elasticity of demand. If you can convince your consumers that your product is so amazing that no matter if they increase price, you gotta buy it, like for example, Apple, that's by definition what Apple does. Like, they come out and they say things that we innovated by sometimes subtracting features from the final product, like, oh, this product doesn't have what the previous had, and that's an innovation. It was brave to remove the headphone jack. It was very brave because now you cannot use all your previous expensive headphones. You have to buy new ones, which is very brave and also very profitable for us. And people were like, yay, that's amazing. Yes, that's what we want. And maybe they didn't say that, but that's what they said with their money, because that year, the profit of Apple went up by a lot, and also they increased their prices. This happened when iPhone 7 came out, and iPhone 7 was one of the most successful devices that the company ever launched, even though it was exactly the same with the previous model, with a little bit faster processor, and also without some of the features that the previous one had. So the firm's elasticity of demand is the key factor. You have to be able to stimulate your elasticity of demand, and it's affected by three other factors. The elasticity of demand for your product, for your brand, will be affected by what happens with the product. So you cannot, if the elasticity of demand is not becoming very good now for phones, because everybody now has a good phone, buying a better phone doesn't make that a big difference than it used to be making 10 years ago. Now, the new phone, I see that sometimes my YouTube feed gives me all these reviews that the YouTubers do, which, by the way, some of them, they do amazing production job in the content and how they film it and everything. So sometimes I watch them and I see the basic question that happens right now is that should you upgrade? It's not if the phone is good or not. The basic question that they try to answer is that if you have that phone, the previous models, is it worth it to upgrade to the new version? That's a basic question they answer right now. So you see here that if the demand for phones has gone down in general, it doesn't matter what you do to your brand, people do not want to buy more phones. If you have a good phone, this barely gonna change how the product is going to go, because people do not like, not your brand, they don't tend to like the product anymore, to spend money for this particular product. So it's not like people don't like phones, they don't like to buy new phone every second year like we used to do 10 years ago. So the number of firms in the market plays a role, and the intensity of competition among firms also affect. Let's see them one by one. Elasticity of market demand. If you have one firm, the market demand and the firm demand will be exactly the same thing. They coincide, because if you're a monopolist, then the product is the entire industry. All right, so market power is determined completely by the elasticity of market demand. So the market power for the brand is determined completely by elasticity of market demand. With more firms, each firm's demand will differ from the market demand. And here is something that it's easy to understand when I'm saying, but it's difficult to understand why it happens. So the demand for a firm's product, the demand for a brand, is more elastic than the market elasticity, the elasticity for all brands together, no matter what brand this product is. So the elasticity for the brand is higher than the elasticity for the product in general. Why does this happen? This is an interesting question, because in general, this has to do with the substitution effect behind the demand function. And in terms of explaining it, I prefer to explain it with an example rather than giving you the dry theory that is behind it. So let's go for this example. All of us, when we go to the supermarket or wherever we do our shopping, we have our favorite products. We have some products that we usually put in our basket no matter what. We don't look at the price so much. Is that you don't make a market choice of product every time that you go to the supermarket. Like, for example, when I visit the supermarket and I need to buy toothpaste, I always get Colgate. So I see where it is, I grab the one that I usually buy, I put in the basket, I go for the next product. So I'm not sitting there to just sit and compare and again compare and see all the other toothpaste. I just get the Colgate and I put it in. And I was always doing that. Like, I don't even know how much it costs. If you ask me now, how much is a tube of Colgate, I don't know if it's like $1 or if it's like $7. I like it because they had a very successful commercial in the past that Colgate gives you a nice smile. And nice smile is the most important thing. And then the guy in the commercial, he smiled and there was a girl there and the girl smiled back to him. And I was like, that's what I want, girls to smile back to me. So I was buying Colgate afterwards, like forever. And I was doing that every time, like every single time I was buying the same toothpaste, except one time that I was in Russia. And I went to the supermarket and I had to buy toothpaste that day. And I was going in the corridor of toothpaste and I saw, Colgate was nowhere to be found. Like the entire place where they were supposed to have the Colgate toothpaste was entirely empty. It's like coming back soon. And I was like, what coming back soon? What am I going to do now? Okay, so I was literally like, I didn't know what to do. So I leave my basket there and I get out, I storm out, and I go to another supermarket. And then in the other supermarket, I realized that they also do not have Colgate. And that's a big problem. Now I'm start panicking. But I was like, okay, let me hold it together. I'll buy a different one. Okay, so I bought Crest for that site. That was a difficult month. Okay, I was like, yeah, every morning and every after meal, I was like, yeah, like it was not nice. But 3 weeks later, they brought Colgate again. So I got Colgate. Everything that I have left from Crest, I threw it away, and I was able to get back to my habits. The point is that I was able to substitute, even unpleasantly and unwillingly, I was able to substitute the brand with another brand. So there was a possibility, like once this became not accessible to me, or in some other cases, if the price skyrockets of Colgate and then the price of Crest remains low, I will maybe willingly change habits because I don't want to pay like $13 for a tube of toothpaste. I will probably switch in this case. But in general, if something happens to the brand, you have the substitution opportunity with another brand. Now imagine if you go to the supermarket and you are looking for your favorite brand, Colgate, and Colgate is not there, but there is also no toothpaste in general. What are you going to do in this case? Go buy like Clorox and wash your teeth like with, brush your teeth with Clorox. You are going to have whiter teeth for sure, but that's not going to be the way to go. Like you cannot substitute the product with another product as easily as you can substitute the brand with another brand. All right, so you cannot substitute, let's say, toothpaste with laundry detergent. But you can substitute very easily Colgate with Crest or any other brands of toothpaste that they don't come to my mind right now. Okay, so because substitution of the brand is easier than substitution for the product in general, we expect this result to be the case. And this is exactly the answer to this. And also, today's lecture is brought to you by Colgate. And Coca-Cola also, but Colgate is a bigger sponsor. Yeah, since we have the video, why not? Actually, Colgate didn't pay me, but if you know anybody that works for them, let them know that I do a very good job advertising them, and maybe they will give me enough money to hire an editor, and I could have even better lectures for you afterwards. All right, so number of firms, number 2, the market power of a brand decreases as more brands enter the industry. Again, for the same reason, because the more substitution opportunities you have, the easier for you will be to not tolerate increase in prices. So incumbent firms would like to stop that and create one way or another barriers to entry to keep new firms out of the market. That's something that is consistent with the example with football that I told you a little earlier. Intensity of competition is important. There are some industries that traditionally competition is very intensive, and they try to gain market share with any possible way, like undercutting each other, like run offers, like with aggressive research and development, aggressive advertisement, and many other methods. In this case, prices may tend to fall to close to competitive levels, like for example, sometimes Coca-Cola and Pepsi aggressively compete with each other. When one of the two companies realizes that its market share is dropping, they just go to very drastic differences in their policy, like they start expensive advertising campaigns, they run offers that they are, like I remember last year, the Coca-Cola had an offer for the 0.5 bottle of Coca-Cola that was below the actual price, below the actual cost that this company had in order to produce this particular bottle. So therefore, we see that price drops down to competitive levels, which means what? That you are losing your market power. If you go down to a competitive price, your market power is zero. So the more aggressive the competition, the less the market power will remain with you. In other industries, on the other hand, the firms, they do not compete aggressively, they just collude, they moderate themselves, they moderate competition, they will not go to these drastic methods to gain market share as long as others will do the same, so they have a status quo that is actually maintained throughout time, and in this case they are able to hold on to their power in general and do not have these increases and decreases of market power. All right, so this is the discussion with respect to market power. Let's now jump to efficiency and we'll start evaluating the markets. Let's revisit this slide that we did 2 lectures ago. If you remember this example that we had with the Indian food, and I had given you a demand curve that we derived after I gave you information about my habits to visit that Indian restaurant, and we had come up with something like that. So back then we didn't discuss about what the actual price is going to be. We just considered my habits depending on a given price that you told me. For example, the price is 25, how many times you will visit the restaurant. If the price is 20, how many times you will visit the restaurant. And you kept asking this question till the point that we had the entire demand curve like the one that we have derived here. So assume now that the actual price in this particular restaurant is $20 per person per meal. So we can locate these to that point here on the vertical axis, and we can consider that the price is given by this red line that is in the graph. So this is horizontal to the actual price of $20. This means that I will go 4 times a month because that's what the demand curve does. Like, give me the price, I tell you how much I will consume. Here my consumption is in terms of visits to the restaurant per month, and this is going to be 4 given this particular demand curve. Now I want you to notice that for my first meal, I was willing to pay up to $35. So if I go just 1 time, I'm willing to pay up to $35 for this particular visit. The same is not true for my next visit, but for my first visit, I was willing to pay $35. However, I do not pay $35. I do pay the actual price that is given from the restaurant to everybody. So it's not like, oh, how much are you willing to pay for your first meal? $35. Okay, that's the price. So you don't do that and you ask everybody how much you're willing to pay. You just have a price, and then if people are willing to pay that or anything above that, they will buy. If not, they will be like, I'll go to eat somewhere else. This means that I have a surplus. I have some money that I was willing to give up for this meal, but now I don't. So this money is a surplus that gets to stay in my pocket, which is something that makes me very happy. That's a very pleasant feeling, to be willing to pay a lot of money for something and then you get it much cheaper than that, and then you stay with all this surplus. So we can actually draw the surplus right here. So we can go up here now. My surplus is from 35, this green line that goes down up to the price. And if you notice in this graph, exactly the same happens for my second meal. I'm willing to pay 30, however, I'm paying less than 30, I'm paying 20. And for my third meal, I'm willing to pay 25, but I still pay 20. So I also have these surpluses there, one surplus for the 2 units and then a smaller surplus for the 3 units. And actually, I do have a surplus even for the units in between. And actually, we can get surpluses almost everywhere in this gap between the demand and the price. So we see that my surplus, my sum of surpluses from the 0 units all the way down to the 4 units that I will actually consume, then this gives me a total surplus because of all the lines that they are next to each other, very close to each other. They actually create this green area, which is my surplus. So this is called the consumer surplus for me. It's the surplus that I have from consuming this product. It's not a surplus in terms of unit. It's a term of surplus, is surplus in terms of money that gets to stay in my pocket and not be spent in this particular good. So the consumer surplus is defined as the difference between the willingness to pay and what you actually pay. So how much you are willing to pay and how much you actually pay for this. And the willingness to pay is given by the demand curve, because this is what the demand curve does. It's like, tell me how much you are willing to pay for those units, or if I give you the price, you give me the quantity, or if I give you the quantity, you give me the price. So one way or another, you can ask questions that these questions, they have to do with willingness. So how much are you willing to pay for 2 meals? How much are you willing to pay for 3 meals? And all this. So my willingness to pay is given by the demand curve, and the actual payment is given by the price. So the price is 20 right here. So the area between the two is the consumer surplus, CS, and it's the dollar surplus for every incremental unit of the good I buy. Here in this example, from 0 up to 4 units, because I do not buy above anything above 4 units. I buy 4 units. So from 0, 0.1, 0.2, and all these numbers between 0 and 4, then this yields the consumer surplus. When the demand curve is a straight line, like for example here, at least above the equilibrium, from the equilibrium and above, the demand curve is a straight line. So you can see that the consumer surplus is a right triangle, because you always have the price to be totally horizontal and the vertical axis is vertical, and therefore you have a right triangle, and it's very easy to calculate the area in a right triangle. It's that formula that your teacher back in primary school told you that one day will be useful to you, and you didn't believe her or him. Now this time came, so what is the formula of calculating the area of triangles? It's the base of the triangle. The base is what? How much you consume, times the height, which is the willingness, the maximum willingness. Right here, I think this would be something like, I don't know, 40 or something like that. So this height would be 40 in that case, times 4, and then you have to divide it by 2, because we take, it's not the entire square, it's half of the square, because we take only the triangle. All right, so what happens when you lose consumer surplus now? This is a point that students usually confuse. So I would like to discuss it a little with you here. So assume that my willingness to pay for a gym subscription is $120 a month. So that's the maximum I'm willing to pay for a gym subscription. A gym subscription is a little peculiar product. It doesn't matter. It's peculiar in the sense that if it's cheap, you're not going to buy 2, because it's like, sir, you understand that with the same subscription, you can come as many times as you want every day, right? You don't need to buy a second one. Okay, so it goes like that. So I'm either buying 1 or 0. Either I buy none or I just buy 1. No matter how much money you have, you're not going to spend them in buying like multiple subscriptions for the same gym for yourself. Buying for somebody else is a totally different story. It's not the same. It's not the same product. Buying a subscription for me and buying a subscription for a friend of mine. All right. So assume that my willingness to pay is $120, and that this local gym that is down the corner, called the Loft Gym, charges $89 per month. So this is how much they charge. The question is, what do I do? Okay, the answer is, since your willingness to pay exceeds the price, you will buy given that there's no better price around. So I checked, there's no better price, there's no gym that is in a suitable area around here. So they offer a price of 89. I am willing to pay up to 120. So this means that potentially I can go there. So if there's no better offer, I do buy one subscription. I have no other reason to buy more than one. Now, from this deal, I do acquire a consumer surplus. That's 120 minus 89. That's $31. So it's $31 that get to stay in my pocket, and that's a good thing. Like, I never earned this money. I never really didn't have them and then I had them. It's money that I already had but gets to stay in my pocket, and this gives me a satisfaction. Now, what if the subscription increases to 110? So this offer that they have for $89 finishes. So I'm thinking about it at home, and then I go to register and I see that this sign that they had with the offer is not there anymore, and now the price, the normal price was 110. What happens in this case? Well, in terms of the transaction, nothing really changes because I still am willing to pay more than what the subscription costs. So I will still buy the subscription. So in terms of transaction, nothing changed. But inside me, I will feel this thing in my stomach like, oh, come on, like seriously? I was willing to buy an hour ago. I was willing to pay 120, I would pay just 89, now I have to pay more. So I do feel this empty feeling in my stomach that I am losing the surplus. So the surplus is nothing that you actually earn, but does affect your own satisfaction in terms that it's purchasing power that you just lose it if you have to pay to them instead of keeping it in your pocket. Now, the same thing can happen from the side of the producer. Producer surplus is the benefit the producer receives beyond what it costs them to produce the good, beyond what they're willing to sell the good for. So the producer surplus is how much you actually receive, which is what? The price. So you are receiving the price that you set for every product. You don't receive anything else. So you set the price, that's what you receive, and how much you are willing to sell, this is given by your supply decision. How much you want to sell is given by your supply decision. So willingness to sell is measured by the supply decision, and then actual payment received is given by the price. So the producer surplus measures the benefit to the producer, the welfare from the side of the producer, between the supply curve and the market price. So if this is your market and this is the demand, this is the marginal cost which serves as your supply curve. If you are a competitive market, then the equilibrium will be at point A, where quantity Q star will be transacted at the price P star. The willingness to sell is given by MC. So this area between P star and MC for the quantity from 0 to Q star will be your producer surplus, that is here the area with the blue color. So producer surplus is the area between the price and the supply curve, or the marginal cost curve, which here serves as the supply curve. All right, let's now try to find out what happens with the total surplus that can be distributed from this market. The consumer and the producer surplus can allow us to quantify economic efficiency in a market. In other words, we can see what does this market have to distribute, and is it all distributed or some of it is lost. So since I have the demand curve here and I also have the price, I can figure out the area between them is given by this green shading, and this is the consumer surplus. So a market is 100% efficient when nothing is lost due to frictions. Like, the word efficiency is a word that we use quite often. Like, for example, a car is considered efficient when is it able to convert the chemical energy from gasoline to as much as possible kinetic energy to move from one place to another. We also use the term efficiency when we talk for light bulbs. So a condensant light bulb is less efficient than a LED light bulb just because the condensant light bulb just converts some of the electricity not to light energy but also to thermal energy because it gives a lot of heat as well, which is undesirable. So we say that the LED light bulb is more efficient. Exactly the same happens with the market. We want to see how much this market can give, and we want to see if something is lost or if everything is given to somebody here. So let's see that. This market has transactions from 0 up to Q star. Above Q star, nobody buys anything, nobody produces anything. So the relevant area I should look for is what happens between Q star and the origin. All right. So above the demand curve, again, there is nothing because nobody demands anything above the demand curve. On the right of Q star, nobody produces or demands again anything because this quantity is above. These quantities are above to whatever is transacted in this market. So I want to understand what happens in this distance, in this area between the MC and the horizontal axis on the left of Q star. This is what is paid for the resources of the production in this particular case. So in this area, I will paint it yellow and I will designate it as this is the cost area. This is what is paid in order to convince the production factors to stay in this market and produce quantity Q star. So as you can see here, all this distance here that is colored in this graph is the maximum that this market can actually yield. And from what I can see, the yellow part goes to the owners of the production factors, the blue goes to the producer, the green goes to the consumer, and there is nothing there that goes to nobody, that becomes a form of energy that is not desired in this market. Everybody who has to get something gets something. I do not care if the distribution is fair. I do not care who gets more and who gets less and who deserves what. This is a question that you have to ask a philosopher or somebody who does ethics or somebody who considers the legal aspect of things. The economist will just tell you that this works just fine because everything that can be given back from this market is given back at 100%. So we say that this market is perfectly efficient. Everything that is not in this shading is actually not efficient to be produced. So in perfectly competitive markets, all gains from trade between the parties are captured. It doesn't matter who captures them. It matters that they are captured. So from 0 up to Q star, that is the relevant production, all the gains from trade are captured by somebody, and this is what matters in terms of efficiency. Now, if you have a non-competitive market, the discussion is very different. Market power results to higher prices and lower quantities. However, what happens with efficiency? Is it improved or is worse? So let's compare the consumer surplus for a perfectly competitive market and a monopoly market and the producer surplus also, and we will see which of the two markets can give us better efficiency, if not the same. So let's consider this market, price on the vertical axis, quantity for the entire market on the horizontal axis. Then I will give you this simple marginal cost. Then here's my demand and the marginal revenue curve for this particular market together as a system. If this is a perfectly competitive market, I have to see where demand becomes equal to supply. Supply is given here from MC or in other words, where MC is equal to price and price is given by demand. This happens at point K, where quantity QC is traded in the market under the price PC. If this is a monopolistic market now, point K doesn't cut it for me anymore. I have to look for the point where MR equals MC. This happens at point L. This yields quantity QM, which if we plug it into the demand curve at point M upwards, it will give us price PM. This means that in perfect competition, the consumer surplus will be the areas A, B, and C. The reason I break it into areas, I don't give it to you as one area, is because we want to compare the two, and it will make a difference in the way it will be the presentation much easier to understand like that. So A, B, and C is exactly what we had before. It's the entire area that could be considered the consumer surplus. And then the producer surplus is what is below that, E plus F. All right, so all gains from trade are captured. This market can give A, B, C, E, and F, nothing more than that. Everything is given. It seems that the consumer is a little more on the receiving side here because it gets a little more. The producer also is not that bad, so it seems that it's kind of an efficient market, but also it also seems like equally sharing the gains from trade. Now, if this was a monopoly, the situation would be different because now you do not produce any more QC, you restrict your production to QM. We said before that the monopoly will want to restrict quantity in order to raise the price. And this is exactly what this monopoly also wants to do. So this part here between QM and QC, this quantity will never be put for sale in the market, meaning that the surplus C and F will be out of the game to begin with. So the consumer surplus will be area A now only because price is PM and we have to look for the area between price and the demand curve. So instead of ABC that was in the perfect competition, now it's just A. The producer surplus is E plus B. Now you lose F because this quantity is not produced. You keep E as a producer, but now because PM is the new price, this means that between MC and PM is the part B as well, and therefore your producer surplus is E plus B, which is much better than you did before, because look at that. If you are a monopolist, you just traded here F for B, and this looks like a very good trade. So the deadweight loss is C and F. C and F nobody gets because it doesn't get to be produced, and therefore it's lost. We refer to this as a dead weight loss. This is actually loss of the efficiency in this particular market. So this market is not 100% efficient anymore, is less efficient. Now, you do have an incentive to monopolize, as I already said. This incentive is that B exceeds F. So the monopolist would not have B if he priced at PC, would get instead F. So the producer surplus would be E and F if this monopolist wanted to be a nice person and price at PC. But he doesn't want to be a nice person to the consumers. He wants to be a nice person to the stockholders of this company, and therefore they will increase price to PM. They will deprive area B and C from the consumers. C nobody gets, but B the monopolist gets to keep, and then the monopolist would also lose F. So as far as this monopolist is concerned, then the whole deal boils down to what do I want, F or B? And as you can see here, the answer is straightway. The yellow area is much bigger than the purple area, so every monopolist that cares to maximize profit would always want to give up F in order to receive B. So this gives you an answer to why the monopolist wants to restrict the quantity in order to raise the price And most of the extra surplus that the monopolist gets here is actually all the surplus that receives above and beyond what had in the perfectly competitive case is coming from surplus that would belong to the consumers had the market not been monopolized. All right, so here's an example of an actual deadweight loss story. And I don't have a complicated graph. I have a very simple example here for you. And as I said before, difficulty is always hidden behind simplicity. So it's super easy, but a lot of people end up to not understanding it very well in the end. So they understand it how I explained it here, but then when we go to the test or to the homework, these kind of questions, they tend to become a massacre in the end. And therefore, I alert you, I raise a red flag, you have to be extra careful. So let's go for it. So we have two individuals, George and Olga, that they care to get the best that they can. And we offer them two alternatives. There is plan A, under which George and Olga will get $10 each. And then you have plan B, George receives 1 unit, but Olga receives 11 units. So let's start with the questions. First of all, which plan is best? When we say best, the first thing you have to ask is best for whom? And we can say best for efficiency. Which one is the most efficient here? And a very good way to look at that is that plan A distributes $20 of wealth to both of them, and plan B distributes $12 total to both of them, and therefore there are $8 that they are lost if we go to plan B instead of plan A. All right, so this makes plan A to be better objectively in terms of efficiency than plan B. Now, what in this case we had Olga alone as a dictator, let's say, and she will decide about the plan. Now you can see that Olga is slightly better off if she selects plan B because she gets 1 unit extra. Of course, for her to receive 1 unit extra, she imposes George to a loss of 9 units. So Olga is like, I will win 1. George will lose 9 for this 1 that I will win. Screw it, who cares? I will be much better off. Who cares about George? All right. So this goes like that Olga will tend to select an inefficient plan just because she has the ability to decide in this case. So what can we say about efficiency? We can say that efficiency is lost because of the incentive of Olga to impose a solution that is not efficient. She has an incentive to not do the best thing. And this is actually what happens with a lot of things in our reality. Like, for example, when you bribe a politician, we have this kind of phenomenon a lot in the world economy in many, many countries. So when you bribe a politician, the politician will do something that is not very efficient for everybody. You never need to bribe a politician to do the right thing. You bribe a politician because you have to win 1, the politician will also win 1, and a lot of other people will lose a lot because of that. So we see, for example, like several in the 1950s, in my country, they used to build bridges in places that they didn't have rivers just because, somebody was getting a cut because of that. Okay, so the society loses just because somebody gets a benefit from there. All right, now, this is a very nice opportunity to talk a little bit about policy also. So if I was a regulator in this particular case, and Olga still had the right to choose the plan, how as a regulator can I convince Olga to select plan A? Well, in this case, I could go to Olga and say, if you select plan A, I will give you 11 units total. So you will get like 10 and I will give you another unit extra. So this will make your units 11. And Olga will be like, listen, if you can guarantee that to me, I don't mind selecting A because it will give me the same payment with B. I don't really care. Then I can go to George and I will tell him, listen, if I convince Olga to select plan A, to choose plan A, you will receive 10, but you will give me 1 and you will keep only 9. But I guarantee to you that you are not going to end up with 1, like if I don't intervene, Olga will just select plan B, and then in this case you get with just having $1. So you will give me 1 unit and I will convince Olga that she will get plan A, she will choose plan A. And in this case, George will have no reason to not prefer 9 instead of 1, because he would get 9 if Olga selects A and he gives me 1 unit. All right, so I will take this 1 unit that George will give me, and I will give it to Olga, and Olga will have 11, and George will have 9. So we end up with best efficiency of 100%. Everything is distributed, but in this case, with the intermediator, with this regulator there, we can actually achieve a better performance in this particular case. Otherwise, this situation will equilibrate at plan B. Olga always will select plan B. Now, this brings me to a discussion of the social cost of the monopoly. The social cost of the monopoly, a lot of people believe that is a deadweight law. So monopolies are not good because they impose the economy into a lower efficiency rate than it would have otherwise. And that's not wrong, but actually it's not the most important social cost of monopolizing a market. The most important cost is something else, something totally different, is that monopolies tend to do what we call rent seeking. Rent seeking is when firms use resources to secure market power, to secure dominant position in the market, to keep everybody else outside of their business so they will be able to monopolize, rather than putting these resources into the production process and making the product better or more accessible to everybody. So we have the companies to spend money to do lobbying, to do advertising, or to build excess capacity just because they want to do exactly what we were talking about before, that is rent seeking. Lobbying, first of all. Lobbying is when you use the money instead of producing the product, use this in terms of doing research and development on the product or advertise it so people will be informed and everything. You use the money to bribe people or to get on the good side of people that they will help you to keep your dominant position. Like United States is notorious for its lobbying. You always have lobbyists that they are people that they have access usually to key officials, that you pay them and they go there and they make a case for the product. Like, for example, we have prohibitions of the production of things that they are unbelievable. Like a few years ago, we had a prohibition that lasted for almost 15 years, that if you wanted to produce fuel for cars that was not coming from oil, you could not use anything else other than methanol. You could not use, for example, corn or this other bioproduction of fuel and stuff like that. It was not allowed because of lobbying, because the companies that they sold oil in the US, they actually had to convince the government to not do anything about that. And we have a lot of pharmaceutical companies that they lobby with the government to give them extension in patents that they are just ridiculous. Like we have, for example, the situation with the with insulin in the US right now, that the price of insulin is 10, 15, 20 times more than the rest of the world. And the reason for that is because insulin is something, even though it's invented like one of the first medication, the first hormones that was ever put in medication several decades ago, more than 60 years, I think, ago. In the United States, it still holds a patent because, for example, the two companies that they offer it, they have made a way of delivering it that is slightly better than it was 25 years ago. In the rest of the world, this is not true, but they had lobbied for that. The government did not come by itself and say, yeah, let's grant the patent for these people, because they really tried to put insulin in a pen instead of this other pen that we had before and stuff like that. So you see that lobbying is a key factor. So you take the money and instead of using them in productive and efficient ways, you just put it in pockets of people that they will give you monopoly rights. Why? Because you will make this money back from charging monopoly prices, and this will pay off for you. So you have this situation like with George and Olga we showed before. Advertising. Advertising can serve as an efficient way of communication, but most of advertising that we see, especially on TV, and now also on YouTube, like 11 times for each short video, we will see that, for example, who doesn't know that Coca-Cola has bubbles and it's cool to drink, and Santa Claus is drinking it up in the Antarctica or wherever he is, and that penguins love it and they just dance around bottles of Coca-Cola, and that it's refreshing and it's cold and ice cold and all that. Who doesn't know that? I remember these advertisements of Coca-Cola since I was like the first time that I opened my eyes and I was able to watch TV. So you see that there's no information value there. Why do you need to do so much information? Well, the reason is that if in order to run a cola business, which is of negligible cost, you need to pay $1 billion a year for advertisement, then this will actually close the door to everybody else that they want to do Coca-Cola. It increases the advertising standards in the industry. So if I make my own cola, Kosmas cola, then this cola is not going to be cool in the market unless I'm able to convince like all the influencers to drink it by paying them tons of money. In this case, the big companies close the door by advertising so much, and they make it difficult for me to keep up with this rate of advertisement. So everybody that is smaller than them cannot enter their business. They do not advertise to inform, they advertise to keep others outside of the business. That's not efficient use of advertising money for the economy. It is for them, not for the economy. And therefore, what we end up having is money spent for keeping others outside of the business in a totally inefficient way, rather than put them to make the product better or create another product or stuff like that. Building excess capacity. This is very interesting and very important, but also one of the most difficult parts to understand. So you may need to see this part of the video several times till you understand and write it exactly down, because it's not that easy. So what happens is that in general, as we have seen, monopolies do want to limit quantity. So by definition, a monopolist will want to produce little, meaning that a lot of monopolists, because they do not produce much, they restrict quantity, they tend to not really enjoy economies of scale because they don't want to flood the market. All right. However, we will also see that a lot of monopolists, they do choose scales of production that they are extremely large. Instead of utilizing them, however, they just let them there most of the machines to collect dust, and they just have them just in case. And they utilize very little part of their production ability because, again, they want their production to be limited to keep the price up. But why do they invest all this money, and they also have a much higher cost because AC will be high because they have an inefficient scale of production. It's too large for their own use. So why do they do that? The reason that they do that is what in economics we call a credible threat, meaning that I do invest in so high productive ability, in increased capacity, so that you, as a potential entrant, you know that I already have the means. If you enter to flood the market with my product, of course, I will have to lower the price if this happens, but that's what I want, because if you enter, I will have a price that will be so low that you will not be able to make profit. So you will not enter. Of course, this means that I have this standing all the time, but this is just these old machines, all this productive ability is just staying there, as I said, and collects dust. But again, this is something that deters you to enter. So I do have these machines. They are not doing anything else than deterrence. And these machines, actually, they are not used in production as they could and allow more people to consume the product. They're used in a very inefficient way of just scaring others out of the market. So this is productive ability and excess capacity that we built with the intention of never using, which is exactly the same thing that most of the nuclear powers do with their nuclear bombs that they make, the missiles that they make. So they create these nuclear heads with the intention to not use them. So they make more and more and more to say, okay, if you use yours, I'm going to use mine, and therefore you're not going to use yours, and therefore I will not use mine. Okay, so this mutual threat actually allows the countries to not be able to use, to not want to use any nuclear weapons, because if there is only one country that has and say, okay, so I don't want to use any nuclear weapons, so I'm not going to make. So the other country will be like, okay, I'll make, and then every time you make them angry, they will press the button and then you're done. Okay, but if you also have a red button and you have your nuclear heads and they press the button and you press the button, then they will not press the button, so you will not press the button. So the same thing happens here. I do have these machines there ready to go just because I want you to not enter. And because you see these machines, you will not enter. But again, these machines, they're able to produce, but they don't because they just serve as a threat. So all these three things, it's money that is just buys dominant position. It's not money that is created that is used in order to create more production, a better product, a new product, or something like that. Okay, it's money that is just there to maintain the higher than normal profits that the monopoly guarantees to the seller. So the incentive to engage in monopoly practices is determined by the profit to be gained. So the transfer of surplus, this area B that we saw in the graph before, this is what makes the monopolies to act like that and be inefficient in order to be able to gain B from the consumers and have a better position in the market. This brings me to the external video. This is a little different video than we had before. It's made by Primer. It's a simulation between demand and supply and shows exactly what happens in efficiency and why consumer surplus and producer surplus are important to understand how transactions are efficient or not efficient. Watch it. It's 12 minutes and 22 seconds. You have to watch it very carefully, but it's as best as somebody ever could do it, because this simulation is really amazing. All right, and this brings us to our internal tutorial video in which I will show you the taxation in perfectly competitive markets and compare it with what happens when you have market power and how taxation affects the deadweight loss in the market. All right, and finally, we have to talk about markets of organs, some organ harvesting, a beauty here that we will talk about in this case. I will present this and I will keep the analysis at a level that I want to show you an example of how a good project could be. So first thing that the good project should have is that it's on an interesting subject. It's something that people will not be bored to read, because those people, they have to read a lot of case studies, and of course they will really like the ones that they will captivate their interest, because it's much easier to pay attention to something that is interesting rather than to something that you have to push through in order to be able to make it. All right, so the first thing will be to make this as interesting as possible. So I will make a case about a market for human kidneys, and I will try first of all to attract your attention, and secondly, I will try to explain the economics behind this interesting case. All right, let's start with an anatomy lesson here. Every human being has two kidneys, and the truth is that they are the only organ that is redundant. So it's the only time that our body has done some really interesting redundancy engineering there, meaning that you don't really need both of them to function almost totally perfectly. Just one of them will be sufficient for 99% of the people. Like 99% of people would have a perfectly normal life even with just one functioning kidney. And a lot of individuals suffer from kidney failure, which is not a joke at all. And in this case, they are in desperate need for a kidney. And I don't know if you have somebody in your family that has a problem with their kidneys, but kidneys are extremely easy to fail, and it happens to a lot of people around us. If you are in a kidney failure state of health, then your life at this point becomes very miserable. You have to be hooked up to a machine that cleans your blood artificially. This should happen every 3 days, tops 4 days. It's something that will last for something like 3-4 hours and will allow you to be okay for the same day, be almost perfect in the second day too, but in the third day and later, you start getting tired very quickly and you start not feeling very well. And in the fourth day, if you don't go for cleaning your blood, the dialysis process, you will feel terrible. So this is what you have to be doing all the time unless you are able to go through a kidney transplant operation. Now, transplants is not an easy thing, it's an extremely complicated process. However, kidney transplants are the easiest ones. They have very high success rates. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's one of the most successful transplant from another live donor. So some individuals donate kidneys. They are kind enough that they will give their kidneys either after death. Some other people, they are alive and they still donate one of their kidneys to loved ones, and in some other cases even to people that they don't even know. However, the kidneys that they are donated, they are not sufficient to cover the demand. The demand is very big. We have very long wait lists of people that they wait for kidney. Today, the sale of human organs is prohibited almost everywhere. So we have to rely to this very, very limited supply of organs. Now, what would happen if we allow the sale of organs? Like, for example, you could go and sell one of your kidneys to a price that would not be a negligible price. So there was some research in the United States. It's several years ago. I have not adjusted for price. But they calculated the average price for a kidney to something near to $40,000. In Singapore, this doesn't sound like a large amount of money to convince somebody to go and sell their kidney. But in the United States, for some particular individual, In some particular states, this would be even for the median individual, $40,000 would be 2 years worth of income, and this makes the offer very interesting. So what if we allow people to sell their organs in order to stimulate the supply, so we will be able to satisfy the demand of all these people that they die from that? As you probably understand, this question is a very controversial question. So before we continue, I want to tell you that we are not talking about a direct market here. We are not talking about a situation like, hey, very nice kidneys you have there. How much would you sell me one? We're not talking about a situation like that. We are talking about a situation where there exists a centralized platform. A centralized platform is let's say, a national organization of transplants, where people who want to sell, they go there and they sell their kidney to the platform, to the organization, and the organization then will be able to throw more transplants on the list and satisfy more people, the demand of more people that they are in the list already. So we're not talking about a direct transaction, we're talking about stimulating the supply of these organs by just allowing people to sell them. Now, still, this topic is a controversial topic. It's something that a lot of people are vertically against and other people are vertically for. So we have to find out economically what are the benefits, what are the pluses, and what are the minuses. And this is exactly what we're trying to do. So we are not trying to say what should be done. We try to say, here are the benefits, here are the disadvantages. We just make your life of deciding easier. Okay, that's all we try to do here. We're not trying to answer a question. We try to allow everybody who will read our analysis, who will see our presentation, to make the decision that they want to make easier. Okay, so if the sale of organs was possible, the supply of organs would definitely increase because you have already a supply of donors, and you should expect that a supply of sellers would also emerge, and therefore you should expect that the total supply will go up. So let's put that in a graph. This is the supply of donors right now. It's totally vertical just because the donors are nice people or dead, and they do not care much about the price. They don't care to get compensation for that because they are either like super nice, which means they are totally above money, or they donate just because of the sake of donating life to somebody else, or they are dead and therefore again money will not make a big difference to them. So the supply would be totally vertical, meaning that this is a fixed quantity of kidneys down here, and then no matter what the price is, doesn't matter, that's going to be the quantity. So this is my supply from donors. SD is supply from donors. And then you will have a supply for the sellers, SM. So the seller will start offering kidneys, not the same seller, like different sellers will start offering more kidneys in the market as long as the price goes up. Like for example, if the price is $40,000 for a kidney, then I would not think about donating. But if the price was $40 million for a kidney, I would start trying to convince myself, like, why do I need it every time? Like, I have the other one, works fine. Like, what can I do that I will need another? And if I have like 40 million, then I would be able to go buy like one more in case I need it, right? So if the price goes up, even I would offer my kidney. And if the price is 40 million, I can tell you that I would offer both of them, okay? So this is a situation how the supply is positive, because the higher the price, the more kidneys will go to the market. So this is, here SM is the total supply, the supply in the entire market from the sellers, and from the donors also, and that's why it starts from here, because at the price of 0 you have only the donors, but as the price catches up you have the sellers to start adding supply to the donors. All right, you have to notice that from before. Now, the demand of organs would not be affected here. Okay, you should not expect that, because in general, if the price becomes very attractive, like the price of kidneys goes way down and you can afford them like very easily, you're not gonna be like, you know what, let me buy a couple of kidneys just in case, because they are cheap. Okay, you are not gonna say that, so the demand is not going to change at all. If there is a market, the demand will stay there. If you have kidney failure, you need a transplant. If you don't have kidney failure, you do not want to have an extra organ to sit there, because I don't think that they last more than 48 hours in the fridge actually. All right, so this is going to be the demand, the same with market or without market. As you can see there, you can easily start figuring out what happens with equilibriums. With a market, the price will go down to something like 40,000, like we said before, so each kidney will cost 40,000, but without the market, if you rely only on donors, then the equilibrium will be at point B, and then the price will be 80,000. And you're like, okay, but you just said that the donors do not get the money. Of course they don't, but if there is willingness to pay, then there is always somebody there to receive the money. And we see that the health sector of the economy is always happy to deal with this kind of situations, to receive money from where there is willingness to pay. So you see from the charges that hospitals have that the prices are extremely high. Now, let's see what happens with surplus, because that's the best way to say if one solution is efficient or it's not. So let's take all these different areas in the graph and examine them one by one, because that will make the analysis much easier for everyone to follow. So donors, first of all, they are not paid the market price of 40,000. So donors are the producers here. I mean, they have the kidneys and they supply them. So they're the suppliers. So we're talking here about the producer surplus. So this is between the current potential price and the supply, the cost in this case, which the cost is totally zero at that point. So we're talking about all this area that I denote by C. So this is the potential surplus for donors that is not actually distributed to anybody. That's not a very big problem, because the donors are donors. They don't care for the surplus. They just do it because they give their organ. Then we have willing sellers that they are not allowed to sell. So this, we're talking about the price that is our 40K. And all these people are the sellers here that they are willing to pay for that. They are getting this price. They're willing to sell at that price. So they have all this surplus right here. So we are talking about the yellow area D. And D is something that if there was a market would be allocated. But here D is actually lost because of non-existence of the market. All right, then you have the recipients that now they pay 80,000 to the hospital instead of 40,000 just to the seller. So E is not distributed to the donors, it goes to the hospitals, which is neither sellers nor buyers, they just intermediate in this case. So we can take this as a deadweight loss as well. And then you have the potential recipients, the really unlucky people, that they would be able to find the kidney while now they do not, and they are willing to pay all this money, but they would pay only 40,000, so they would get a surplus between the demand and the price of 40,000 in the area F, and this is another surplus that is never delivered in the market just because a market doesn't exist. So we see here that if you exempt Part C, that the donors would not care about it even with a market or without. Parts E, F, and D, they just do not, are not allocated just because a market here is not allowed to function. So should we go for a market or should we go only for donation? Again, the answer is with everyone. Everybody has their own beliefs. The only thing we need here is that your belief to be consistent with the science. I will give you the pros and the cons, and then you will put the weights in the two, and you will come up with yes or no. But you will come up on your own. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. So we see that disadvantages of prohibiting a market is that there is low efficiency in the market, lots of surplus that doesn't get to be distributed. The price of operation now is high, with hospitals mainly getting the benefit, sometimes from the patients directly, sometimes from the insurance companies, doesn't matter. Demand cannot be covered by supply, so you do have the excess demand there, which is not just, oh, I want to consume this and damn it, I cannot. It's like, oh, I don't have a kidney and damn it, I'm going to die. So this is kind of a very different story, a very sensitive issue. And we are talking about something that potentially could save these people. So allowing the market doesn't sound very good, because it doesn't sound good to allow people to sell stuff. To be honest, I don't have an opinion on this. It seems to me quite dystopian to allow people to do that. I'm sure that it's going to lead to situations that they will not sound nice in the end. But on the other hand, I'm thinking also those who die without being able to receive a transplant, and they will be able to be saved from that. So it's a situation that is not easy to call. So kidneys in this method do not go necessarily to those who value the organs the most. So the disadvantages of having a market now. First of all, it's unfair to allocate transplants according to the ability to pay. This is actually that one from the other side, from how you see it from the reverse angle. And that's also very important. So unfair to allocate transplants according to the ability to pay. And then also there is some issues of imperfect information, that a lot of people who tend to not have a very healthy lifestyle, they will be the first ones that they will sign up for selling a kidney. Because usually you have people to need money, because mainly they make very wrong decisions in their life, and they end up to need money to cover for these serious mistakes. And those serious mistakes usually take a toll in their health. Like, for example, somebody who is a drug addict may want to hide the situation in order to be able to sell their kidney to get more drugs, but it's not the best candidate for donating a kidney if you are a heavy drug use, or a person that you have problems that do not allow you to do that, and maybe you want to hide it and not allow the process to be as transparent as it is today. So again, the best economist is an economist that has only one hand. That's what is attributed to Ronald Reagan, a past president of the US, who was also a Hollywood star. Ronald Reagan, he used to be an actor in Western movies. Then he became a president actually for two terms. And he had a little bit of trouble understanding the economics very well. Some of the things that he did, the American economy is still paying for it. But he said one of the very nice things, that you should, the best economist is an economist with one hand. And they said, why do you say that? And he said, because always when I ask my economic advisors, what's your opinion? They tell me what their opinion is, and then they tell me, well, but on the other hand, and then they tell me the opposite. So I don't know what to do. So economics is not a science that should tell you what to believe. And be aware of these economists that they go on TV or they write books and they go in this commentary and they try to explain the news to you. The job of the economist is to give you the tools. That's what the science does, is to give you the tools to understand and make a decision on your own. You should never let other people to tell you what to believe. Just make sure that when you believe something, you base it on arguments that they have a concrete, stable basis in the science, and you know what you're talking about. That's the best thing you can do when you are in an argument, in a debate, or any type of conversation. And believe me, you will have this chance a lot in this course and later in your life. Thank you very much. I will see you in the next lecture.